I want to welcome you to our first episode, really, of Ask Two Lawyers. Of course, we've been here before doing our podcast and videos on the Tom Girardi trial. And we decided to kind of change our name to something that's maybe a little bit easier to say, maybe a little bit easier to remember, because before we were saying Probate Polymath Podcast. So say that 3 times fast, Stewart. It's a little bit of a mouthful. So now we have changed to Ask Two Lawyers. That's what the show really is about anyway. So we want to encourage you to participate, encourage you to ask your questions. Of course, we do trust and will litigation, so you can ask us anything on that topic, but ask us anything on any other legal topic too. And we'll do our best to answer. We don't know everything, but we like to think we know a lot. And we'll get started on just kind of going over your questions and things that you're interested in. And then the other thing we want to do today is cover the Vanderpump revenge porn case. And Stewart, that looked to be so far a pretty interesting reading, don't you think?
The complaint was riveting. Most complaints are quite boring to read, but this one laid out quite a bit of facts, a lot of detail, specific allegations. Always as a lawyer, the concern is when you lay out that many facts, you better be right on those facts, because people later on are going to be able to go through those facts through the use of written discovery, form interrogatories, special interrogatories, demand productions, requests for admissions, and then, of course, depositions and subpoenas. So all of that's going to be happening in this case from a procedural standpoint, and all of the facts that are alleged in this complaint, they're going to be put under a microscope, and we'll have to see which ones are true and which ones maybe, well, if they're all true, then there's going to be some very sad people here that are being sued, but that generally isn't how cases go.
Yeah, I mean, the truth is usually somewhere in the middle, right? So let's take a look at what we're talking about here, and just move that over to the side. Oh, I also want to bring on producer Eric so that we can have him at our disposal if anybody wants to comment or ask any questions. Hey, Eric.
Hey, guys. Great to be here. Yeah, all the viewers, be sure to write your questions in the comments and we'll answer them on air.
So this is the complaint that we're talking about. And of course, and let me just get over here. Stewart, you know how to use this better than I do. And so this is the attorney, this is the plaintiff, so Rachel Leviss.
Hey, Keith, you want to step back here just a little bit and just give kind of a broad brush of what's going on?
Yeah, so what we have is really a complaint that was filed by Rachel Leviss against 2 different people, Tom Sandoval and Adriana Madix.
No, it's Ariana, isn't it?
I'm sorry, Ariana Madix.
So what you and I are proving right here from the very beginning is we've heard of this series called the Vanderpump Rules. I've never watched it. Have you ever watched it?
No. So if you're coming here to get some insight in terms of the show or how we feel about the show, you're at the wrong place. If you want to hear about our thoughts in terms of the actual lawsuit that was filed, kind of what from the perspective, then maybe we can shed some light on that. But yeah, I'm clueless when it comes to who the players are here, other than I've read through reports.
It sounds like it's an exciting show. At least it was exciting for a while, and then it got even more exciting. And because of the personalities in that show and the things that happen on that show, we end up with this lawsuit that's filed in Los Angeles County, and it includes the famous lawyer to the stars, I guess I could say, Mark Garagos. So he's included. There's another large firm in Los Angeles that's included, and they're representing Rachel Leviss, and she is suing 2 cast members of Vanderpump Rules, Tom Sandoval, who most people know now. He shot to fame pretty quickly over the last few years. And then there's also Ariana Madix, and she's also involved in the show as well. So out of that show, we now have a lawsuit, a real true lawsuit from a live reality TV show. This is real people's lives, and there's real damages asked for. This is the real deal. And so it'd be interesting to talk about this case and see, what are the merits? How does it work? And is this something that Rachel Leviss can be compensated for?
Yeah, it's going to be pretty interesting. And the whole case has to do with Leviss having an affair, apparently, allegedly, with Sandoval. There was some secret recordings of FaceTime calls. And then Madix comes in, finds those recordings, and obviously is not happy because she was in a long-term relationship with Sandoval. And,
let's break that down too. So my understanding from reading the complaint was that Leviss has when you say it's an affair, neither one are married. At least I don't believe they're married, but they, I guess Tom Sandoval was in a relationship with Ariana Madix. Yeah, and that's true on the show. Apparently, it's depicted on the show. And then he apparently ends up sleeping with Rachel Leviss, according to the complaint. And during their relationship, he, according to the complaint, surreptitiously records some FaceTime calls they have where apparently Rachel Leviss is at points in time naked. She's apparently masturbating. There's some of these things going on. And so the question is, how did these recordings that Leviss says she didn't know about, Rachel Leviss says, I have no idea this happened. Tom Sandoval apparently took these of her. How did these end up in Ariana Madix's possession?
Yeah, and I think the one thing everybody seems to agree with as I'm reading through the pleadings is that they all came from a phone that belonged to Sandoval. And you can see that the parties that we're talking about, Rachel Leviss, but also Sandoval and Madix, they're the only parties. And so there's some allegations we're going to see where there's, some things said about Bravo and different, the network and production companies. They're not included as parties, which I thought was kind of interesting.
So just to develop that storyline a little bit further, though, it sounds like Sandoval was at a club playing his guitar with his band or something, and he allegedly had his phone drop out of his pocket. I guess that could happen. And it slides across the floor, and apparently it unlocks, or maybe it was unlocked to begin with, and Ariana Madix gets a hold of the phone, and she happens to start searching through it, apparently without Tom Sandoval's permission, according to the complaint, and she sees these recorded FaceTime calls, and there's some nudity and so forth. And so obviously Leviss gets wind of this, and she says, you know what, this is horrible, and she had to go to apparently some treatment over this, and she's not doing well, and so she ends up filing this lawsuit. So that's where we're at. Yeah,
and there was one account that said that the phone was unlocked. There was another account that said that Madix knew the passwords because she was in a long-term relationship with Sandoval, and she was able to access the phone knowing his passwords. I don't know. So however that worked, somebody who probably follows the show could tell you better than we could. But I want to talk about some of the things that are being said here. So first of all, we see that the plaintiff here, which is Rachel Leviss, been on Vanderpump Rules for quite some time, 2016 to 2023. So she has a pretty long history on that show. And, she used to have a different boyfriend who apparently would treat her quite horribly, somebody with the last name of Kennedy. Again, showing our complete ignorance of the show and what it's all about. But the thing that I wanted to show, though, if we go down here, and I guess this is the part here where Leviss was on the show from 2016 to 2023. So that's 7 years of being on that show. There's a little trick that lawyers do when it comes to pleading, and I wanted to kind of show that, and I highlighted it right here. So Leviss is informed and believes, and on such information and belief alleges that, right? So you see a lot of this in this complaint. You see a lot of this in a lot of complaints. What are they doing here when they use this language?
Well, they're protecting themselves if those facts don't actually turn out to be true, because they're saying, well, we thought they were true based upon the current knowledge at the time, the current facts, the current inferences at the time. And so this is a safe way to plead in a complaint. I don't believe this was a verified complaint, but even so, a verified complaint being sworn under penalty of perjury, most civil complaints in California are not verified. But still, if you're Leviss and her lawyers, you don't want her sitting for a deposition a year from now or 2 years from now, and she has all these allegations she's made in her complaint where they just turn out to be either inaccurate, misdirected, or maybe they're just, flat wrong. And so you don't want to be beat up at deposition. So this is a safety valve that allows you to say, hey, I believe these things to be true, and I'm doing my best here, and I believe them to be true, and I'm going to allege them at this point in time. And this makes sense, Keith, because in civil lawsuits in California, we have what we call a notice pleading state, where you really don't have to give all of the facts that they gave here. I mean, this was a very detailed complaint with many, many allegations and many details. You just really have to put the other side on notice that you're suing them for particular claims, and here are the facts that support those claims, and that's about it. But here, this was a very detailed complaint.
Yeah, it's a long one. I mean, for example, let me just show this part here. So they're saying that at the time, Vanderpump Rules was facing an uncertain future. Interest amongst the public had waned, the plot had grown stale. Madix in particular was reportedly on the chopping block. So, I mean, these are examples of allegations. And essentially what they're doing is they're trying to kind of set the stage. And what I got the sense from reading this, you'll see down here, they had every incentive to leverage these salacious threads into the storyline Vanderpump Rules so desperately needed. And that's precisely what happened in a series of otherwise unlikely events. And so they don't necessarily come out and say that all of this was staged or it was some sort of an overall plan to divulge these salacious videos, but they sure allude to it. They sure make you think that that's what they're trying to say, and that all of this somehow was intentionally done just to pump up the ratings for Vanderpump Rules.
Well, and if that's true, the producer, distributor, whoever it is of the show, I think it's Bravo, are they named in this complaint? And if they aren't, why aren't they? I mean, if if you were looking at this as if you had clients come to you with this story and you're making these allegations that this was really a way to make the show more productive, wouldn't there be some liability that may lay at the feet of the producers of the show?
Yeah, you would think so. And that was the thing that kept going through my mind, because throughout this, they talk about the hostile work environment. Here's again, information and belief that the videos were FaceTime videos. But let me see, I highlighted, there's a part where they actually talk about that, because there was, of course, once everybody found out about this, there was all sorts of drama.
And yeah, to be clear, it is Bravo show. And I don't think we mentioned it, but Leviss was on the show as well. All three of them were co-stars together. She actually went by Raquel at the time, and then goes by Rachel now.
Okay. And this, again, look at this passage here where she's alleging that the production directed Leviss to film with Sandoval after the news broke and after the videos came out, and that it was very confrontational. It was very upsetting for Leviss, and in fact, and it left her enormously vulnerable to a nightmare scenario. I mean, again, all of this sounds like she's saying that the production company forced her to do things that caused her pain and all damage and harm. So I don't really understand why they're not defendants in the lawsuit, but they're not, and they weren't.
Not only that, though, Keith, when the allegations go on to say that after this production was done at Sandoval's apartment for the show, that he apparently made some admissions that would be prejudicial against him, and that he basically refused to ever show up on the show again unless the producers caved into his demands to remove some of those damaging statements. Now, again, all of this is just in the complaint. We don't know if these are true. These are allegations that are being made. But if that's the case, it is curious to me, why is it that the Bravo or whoever else is in charge, whoever's making the money off of this show, producing this show, why are they not included in this complaint? I mean, that seems to be the deep pockets. That would be a lot of dollars there. And yet we're just going after, they're basically two cast members, Tom Sandoval and Ariana Madix. And I don't know how well off Sandoval or Madix. I don't know if they're wealthy individuals or if they've become wealthy due to their fame, but they're certainly probably not as wealthy as the production company that's putting the show out.
Yeah, you wouldn't think so. And, if they're really the ones, I think this is it here, if they're really the ones to blame, that the production company is the one to blame, I'm sorry. And you'll get a flavor of it right here. So it's clear that Bravo deliberately sacrificed Leviss for the sake of its commercial interests, from its refusal to allow her the opportunity to tell her side of the story and defend herself. So once again, they're blaming Bravo for her harm and not letting her express herself, that they subjected her to a hostile work environment. I don't know, maybe there's another lawsuit coming, but it's not part of this one.
So the only thing I can think of at this time is, number one, sometimes you don't go after people with deep pockets because they have deep pockets and they can hire really good lawyers, and lawyers they're willing to spend a lot of money on. So that was the first thought that came through my mind when I saw this. And then I guess the other thought is this, and again, I'm not making allegations here. I'm just surmising from what I'm seeing here. Is this just to cause grief for Madix and Sandoval? Is this just to get them to go out and hire lawyers and have to face the litigation gauntlet of expense and emotional turmoil? Or is this true? Is this a true lawsuit? Is she really damaged? Does she really feel damaged? And she feels like that, that number one, Sandoval surreptitiously recorded this stuff and then disclosed it to more than just Madix, but Madix took it then and showed it to other people. Well, that certainly would be damages, but it seems to me that if those allegations are true, and they may be true, Keith, but if those allegations are true, why aren't you going after Bravo? It just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, it doesn't to me either, but you might be right. It might be that they don't want to fight the deep pockets of Bravo. They're going to have better lawyers. They're going to, be more aggressive maybe than what Madix, and maybe they just want to go after Madix and Sandoval because that's where the pain point. That's where the hurt is.
But I would say if I were selling this case to you to take it as a lawyer, and let's just assume that these allegations all are true, just for a second here, you would sue anybody. You would sue Bravo. You would sue anybody because the allegations, if they're that true, it doesn't matter how good the lawyers are on the other side. They're going to have a very difficult time dealing with those claims.
Yeah, and if I had thought that there was allegations or we had any facts to support a possible claim where Bravo or any production company forced somebody to do something against their will that was damaging to them, I certainly would be interested in naming them in the lawsuit. I wouldn't leave them out. And so, you have to have some factual basis to sue somebody, but you don't have to have admissible evidence. It's the beginning of the lawsuit. All you need is allegations.
Yeah, and even if there's some type of release language that these cast members sign, saying that they understand that there's going to be edgy issues brought up, and you're not in a typical work arrangement where you're not going to be hearing things that are uncomfortable from time to time. I'll bet you those releases were obtained from the cast members. I don't think it includes having pornographic photos of yourself that you didn't realize were being taken, distributed to other people. So again, if that's a true statement, we need to know why it is that only these two cast members are being sued at this point in time.
Ooh. So you just said something that raised something in my mind. What if they're doing it this way because there's arbitration clauses? What if they have contracts with Bravo that forces them into arbitration? Arbitration is usually confidential. It's not filed in the public eye. And so what you do is you sue these two individuals who you don't have an arbitration clause in public court to get your side of the story out. And then separately, if you're going to take action against Bravo or production company or whatever, you do that using the arbitration. I'll bet you anything that they have a contract with arbitration clauses with Bravo and the production team and all of that.
Well, and it may be, and it'd be interesting. Could these two individuals that are being sued here, Sandoval and Madix, could they also join the arbitration? I don't know if they could or not, but it seems that you raise an interesting point. You're going to have two trials, it looks like, if that's the case. If there is a mandatory arbitration, which is confidential, if that's going forward with Bravo and Leviss, well, what about this case? And then what if one's determined before the other? I mean, it really raises some interesting procedural issues.
It really does. But if you look at it in terms of just a PR, push, it would kind of make sense that you would want to get your lawsuit out in the public eye, and you may not be able to do that if you have an arbitration clause with Bravo, because they just wouldn't. They wouldn't allow you to file in the court. You'd have to file in arbitration. So interesting. Okay. Let's talk about the actual causes of action. So first off is eavesdropping. So good old-fashioned eavesdropping, because she claims a couple things that Leviss is claiming. Number one is that she didn't know that she was being recorded. Sandoval tried to say he did tell her. That I don't think he did, according to what I read in the pleadings. And then Leviss is also claiming that Madix shared it at least with Sandoval, but probably with other people, because she says in her allegations there's too many other people who seem to have intimate knowledge of what was specifically in the video that you wouldn't know unless you saw the video. Madix, in her motion, which we'll talk about in just a second, says, no, I didn't share it with anybody. I only shared it with Sandoval. I talked to him about it. And then the videos were promptly deleted, so she says, within 30 minutes. So she claims not to have shared it with anybody. But that's ultimately what the lawsuit's going to be about when it comes down to these different claims. So all these claims are based on the idea that somebody secretly recorded Leviss and then distributed those secret recordings. And so that's what this first one is about when we're talking about eavesdropping, and that's under the penal code. And, a lot of people don't know that even if you're on a phone call, if you're on a phone call and you don't tell the other person in California, this is how it works, if you don't tell the other person on the line that you're recording, it actually is illegal under the penal code. You must disclose a recording if you're going to record somebody on the telephone. You cannot just record telephone calls privately, and you definitely cannot use them as evidence because it's illegal to record them in the first place. And so we kind of have a pretty strong law on that in California. Not every state's like that, but in California, that's how it works. What were your thoughts on the eavesdropping, Stewart? Anything there?
I mean, it's plain Jane. It's the cause of action that you would use here, and I note that it's only against Sandoval and not Madix, because of course, Madix was not involved allegedly in the recording of the FaceTime phone calls.
Yeah, and that's an important thing to point out. So as you go through these causes of action, you can see this one's only against Sandoval, and so that makes sense.
And just briefly, what does it mean when they're suing does? And let's not put everybody to sleep, but what are doe defendants?
They're just placeholders for people that you may discover later in time who also are proper defendants, and you can add them to the lawsuit. So you're supposed to name all the defendants when you file your lawsuit, but maybe you don't know all of them. And so facts and evidence might come out, and you might find yet somebody else who is responsible, and we call them doeing them in. You can substitute them in for one of the doe places. And so it's just it's a legal device to allow you to add defendants in the future. Okay, here's the good one, revenge porn. And this one was really quite interesting because it's under Civil Code Section 1708.85. And it's not a claim I've ever dealt with before, either bringing or defending, but I did look it up. And the interesting thing about it that I thought was if you disseminate any image or video of somebody who, whether they might be naked or in a sexual act of any kind, you will be liable under this code section. There's a private cause of action that you can be sued for disseminating, compromising, either naked photos or photos of people doing different sex acts. And it's the dissemination that is actionable. So in other words, it's not so much the recording. So Madix could have gotten the recording, and even though she's not the one who recorded it, she's not the one who lied about recording it secretly. If she takes that recording and she disseminates it, she then is liable under the Civil Code section. And so just, you can't get out of this by saying, well, I'm not the one who took the videos, or I'm not the one who took the photos. It doesn't matter. You found them and you then went about and disseminated them, put them on the internet, handed them out to your friends, stood on the street corner and handed out copies. You're still liable under the Civil Code section. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And this one particularly is against Madix and not Sandoval, because supposedly Madix is the one who shared those videos. Those are the allegations. We don't know if she did or not. She claims she did not. But I think that's part of what prompted this lawsuit too, is the fear of the unknown.
Yeah, and I want to, California, there isn't anything that California doesn't want to codify. In other words, California wants to make a law for everything and anything. And there's times where, that is difficult to deal with because you're like, oh my gosh, another law for something that really isn't all that important. But revenge porn, that came around as soon as 15, 20 years ago is when I first started hearing about this, and the laws weren't there to protect people because you didn't think you would need a law to protect something like this. But I'm glad that California has acted here and says, look, if you're a bad actor here and you take some video or photo or any other type of material of somebody that was taken in a private place, and that person has a reasonable expectation of privacy of those events or the conduct that's depicted in those photos or videos, you cannot just willy-nilly go out and disclose those and have fun with it and make fun of them and think that it's funny and that there's nothing that's going to come back for your actions. Me personally, I'm not mortified by what this poor Leviss is feeling. I mean, I feel bad for her, but I'm not mortified by it because it didn't happen to me, right? But that's why these laws are there. The laws are there to protect all of us so that when this kind of tragedy does happen to you, you have recourse against somebody so that you don't, we don't got people going over to other people's houses and shooting them in the face. Although I'd want to go shoot somebody in the face if they disclose something so intimate like this about me. So this law is here to protect people. And so if any lesson can be drawn from this, if you come across this type of material, do not disclose it to anyone else because you can be held accountable for some significant damages that could ruin the rest of your life. And so you got to really think about that if you come across this type of material.
Yeah, it's really important. And it's the dissemination that matters. And I think sometimes, people might miss that point. And then, of course, it makes sense that we would also have an invasion of privacy claim. And that's against Sandoval and Madix. And I suppose it's Sandoval because he did the recording, Madix because she supposedly distributed it or allegedly did. We'll find out, as the case progresses, what ultimately happens. But that's the invasion of privacy. So that kind of goes hand in hand with what we already addressed, I think. And then the good old, and you see this fairly often. This one a claim I have both brought and defended against intentional infliction of emotional distress. So it's kind of a funny claim, isn't it? Because you could be sued for intentionally inflicting emotional distress on somebody, but emotional distress is not making them feel bad or hurting their feelings. I mean, it has to be something substantial, like severe distress. And so you see these claims like in wrongful death cases where, a parent sees their child get hit by a car and dies or something. Like that would be extreme emotional distress that, in theory, could base a claim on this. So, it's interesting that they brought it here. I mean, I suppose that if the allegations are true that somebody took this material and intentionally disseminated it, maybe that does rise to the level of emotional distress that you need for this claim. But maybe not. I mean, it's kind of interesting to see how this claim will play out. What are your thoughts on the emotional distress part of this?
Well, this is one of the newer torts that are out there. Torts are civil wrongs that you can sue somebody for. Good old fashioned battery where somebody comes up and punches you in the face and you had no idea why they punched you in the face. You can sue them for that and get your damages for that. Intentional infliction of emotional distress and negligent infliction of emotional distress. Here we have intentional. So in other words, they're in their brain. They intended to harm this person. And that's what Leviss is going to have to prove if she's going to win her lawsuit. It reminds me in law school, I think the seminal case that I read, and maybe you read the same one at your law school, Keith, was about a lady that was standing by two horses. She was on a public city street, and there was these two giant horses. I guess they were like Clydesdales, and they were looking down at her, and they were snorting, and she couldn't get away from them, and she fainted and fell and hit her head, and so she sued for intentional infliction of emotional distress. She lost that case because the court said that there wasn't enough there to hold it, but they did find that this was something you could be compensated for under the right circumstances. And if we could go back in time, I'd like to ask that court, if somebody surreptitiously records you while you're masturbating and then discloses it to somebody else, is that enough? And my gut tells me that's way more than two horses looking down on you, snorting at you, scaring you. That's enough to be intentional infliction of emotional distress. So even though we see this in a lot of cases, if there is truth to the allegations made in the complaint, this is something the jury could really grab onto and could impose significant liability and damages to the bad actor, or to whoever it is that was involved in this type of behavior.
Yeah, so it's a good add-on in terms of the claim.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the damages. So they talk down here, and I want you to tell us the difference about this, Stewart. So they talk down here about general and compensatory damages, and then here, special damages. So if you didn't know what these things were, you would say, well, here's the damages, the special damages, $129,000. Well, that doesn't seem like a lot of money. So she's suing for $129,000. That's what she wants to get out of this. But you also have to be cognizant of this other prayer right here, that is for compensatory damages and other general and consequential damages. So according to proof, so there's not a number there, but what is the difference here in terms of general versus special damages?
Well, I mean, lawsuits are about liability and then damages. And unfortunately, many lawyers spend way too much time on liability. They literally will spend 90% of their time on liability and maybe 10% on damages. It really should be maybe 40% liability, maybe even 30% liability, and the rest of your time is on damages. Keith, I remember you and I were in a trial several years back where we were going against, well, actually, the lawyer was on our side. He was representing another set of clients. And we actually liked this lawyer quite a bit. And he was a nice guy, smart guy. But he got up and he did an hour closing at the time. And at the end of his closing, he just sat down and everyone was confused. And the reason everyone was confused is because he'd spent an hour going over just the liability, showing why the person was wrong, why they shouldn't have done what they did, how the person violated rules and so forth. But they didn't even address damages in closing. And that's because lawyers just don't do it. And I'm not sure why, because damages, that's everything. That's where it's at. By the way, in this kind of a case, you don't bring these special damages. And the reason you don't bring these special damages in this kind of a case is because they're an anchor that will weigh down what you're going to ask for in general damages. So you're asking a jury in California, and the way it works in California, you need 9 out of 12 people, 9 out of 12 jurors to agree that you're going to get damages. And that's for each different kind of damage. You need 9 out of 12. It can be a different 9 out of 12 for every one. The problem with special damages that are this small, when you actually ask for your number of general damages, it's going to anchor and weigh those down. And so now people are going to go, oh, $115,000 in special damages plus $4,000 for therapy. I mean, $4,000 for therapy? Really? Did you really ask for that? To $10,000 for legal fees? No, throw that out. All you're asking for is general damages. And I would say that the allegations in this complaint, the despicable behavior that's painted in this complaint about some bad actors here, if true, is very similar to a wrongful death kind of case. In wrongful death cases where somebody's driving down the road and they get creamed by a 18-wheeler that's unsafe to be on the road, the special damages in that case are actually very small, Keith. There's going to be funeral expenses. There's going to be cleanup expenses on the freeway. Those special damages are probably going to be $100,000. So you never put that kind of a case with those grave facts in front of a jury and let them see a number that's so small on the special damages side. So special damages, those are things that we can look at with a receipt to determine, like $10,000, $275 for lawyer fees, $4,175 for therapy. I mean, $4,000 for therapy, that's like what in Los Angeles? That's a week. I don't know what it is. It's not very much. And so I'm not saying this person didn't have to go through these things. It sounds like she did have to get some therapy. It sounds like she did have some lawyer fees, and it sounds like she had some medical expenses. I mean, $115,000 in medical expenses. That's actually a larger number, but it's not what you're going to ask for in general damages, because this is despicable behavior, much like in a wrongful death case where somebody's killed. It's the worst thing you can do is to take a family member away from their family forever. The last thing you want to do is weigh it down with special damages. So that's where general damages are just, what does the jury think that this is worth? And it's unfortunate that we have to put money as the barometer of what happens to a family that loses somebody like this, or in this case, for revenge porn. How much is that worth? How much is it worth for every time Leviss, if all of the allegations are true and she proves them, how much is it worth for everyone who knows her, everywhere she goes, to be able to pull up these pictures or to think about what happened to her, think how humiliating that would be for a very long time to come in the future for her, maybe even forever. This could change the whole trajectory of her life, again, if these allegations are true. And we don't know if they're true or not. So, but if they are, this is horrific behavior. So toss the specials, withdraw them, and maybe they're going to do that. Maybe they just put them in the complaint here. withdraw the specials, only ask for general damages, and you're going to ask for a lot. You're going to ask for millions of dollars. And the way you do that is you talk to a jury in voir dire. This is the interview that lawyers and judges have with jurors as they're brought up into a pan, the jury box to be interviewed to see if they're a good fit for the case. One of the first questions I ask jurors when I have a moment to talk to them is, if I'm able to prove my case to you and the damages are in the millions of dollars, are you willing to say that my client is she's going to get millions of dollars if I'm able to prove my case to you? And there's some jurors that simply say, I would never give more than $100,000, no matter what you said, no matter if it's wrongful death, if it's revenge porn, or whatever the case may be. And you got to get those jurors off the jury, because you want people that are going to sit there and they're going to apply the law as they see it, and they're going to give damages that meet the harm caused. And here, this harm is big. It's awful to think about. If these were disclosed, if these pictures of pornography were disclosed to other people, and you were not a porn star, you did not consent to this, you were not open to this, those damages are big. And then the other damages they have here are equitable relief, and that's just simply a temporary restraining order or injunctive relief. That's just to say, hey, stop spreading this stuff around. Stop it. Don't use it. You don't spread it around. Stop. Delete it from your phone. This type of behavior, again, if true, is so despicable that it would also be subject to punitive damages. And punitive damages are different than general damages, and they're different than special damages. Punitive damages are to punish bad actors. So if somebody did take porn that was of you or photos of you that you had an expectation of privacy of those, and they're of your body parts, and everyone can now see them, that's despicable conduct, and we're going to punish the people that did this disclosure, and we're going to punish them by making them pay money. And you do punitive damages based upon the bad actor's worth. So if they're worth $100 million, the punitive damage could easily be $20 or $30 million, because you want to punish that person. You want them to feel it, that what their behavior was so despicable, and we want to spank your hand so hard that not only do we keep you from doing that again, we make an example out of you to the rest of the world that you are not to do this type of behavior. And then one last type of damage I'll add, Keith, is under the revenge porn, and we like statutes like this as plaintiffs' lawyers, there is an attorney's fees provision and an expert fees provision. The attorney's fees provisions says that if sorry, I forgot her name, Rachel Leviss, if she is successful in this case, she can get her attorney's fees paid. Now think about that. If a jury comes back and gives her $100,000 in general damages, which I think that the behavior alleged here would be in the multiple millions of dollars in general damages, but let's just say there's only $100,000 the jury's willing to do, the jury has nothing to say about attorney's fees. That's up to a judge. And so a judge, after the jury comes back with $100,000 in damages, is going to say, okay, Leviss was successful. She won her claim, and people have been punished with $100,000 in damages. We're also going to add on all of her attorney's fees to the other side to pay as well. Well, let me ask you, Keith. I've been talking a lot here. Sorry about that. But let me ask you, how much in attorney's fees would somebody like Leviss have to pay if she went all the way to trial in a case like this?
Oh, it'd be big. I mean, with everything that, all the depositions they have to do, I mean, you're probably looking at a minimum of $300,000 to $500,000. It could easily be $500,000 to $800,000, maybe $1 million. I mean, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars of attorney's fees on a case like this.
And so what happens then is not only does that person get $100,000 the jury gave them, but they get the judge to give them, another $1 million plus in attorney's fees and costs and so forth. So, again, I'll end this by saying that if you really want to go after a bad actor here, it seems like there's another defendant out there. Maybe it's being done through arbitration, but it seems to me that the allegations made here, even if remotely true, those are significant damages.
Yeah, I mean, you make a good point. And if these allegations are proven true and a jury finds them to be true based on the admissible evidence, I mean, you would think that somebody who has gone through this, where it's intentionally disseminated, it ruins her life, it ruins her career, it puts her through distress. I mean, you would have to think that that'd be worth several million easy. And that comes back to your point of, if you're going to go into court, and you're going to stand in front of the jury and say, based on all of these actions, we're asking you, jury, to award general damages of $10 million to compensate this person for everything that they went through and everything they lost, just not just what they lost already, but what they're going to lose in the future by no longer being able to work in show business. That $10 million, looks like a huge number when you compare it to the $139,000 of special damages. And I think that's what you were talking about, that the $139,000 of special damages, it ends up setting a very low anchor point versus if you don't have those at all, you just, don't worry about that. We're going to waive all that. I'm just standing here asking for $10 million for all of this despicable conduct. And that's what, I'm asking the jury to award. It's very different from having that low anchor point. And so, it obviously depends on the evidence, depends on what's proven in court, depends on what the jury decides. But it is a really interesting point that you're bringing up in terms of the difference. And then the attorney's fees are just a huge hammer. I mean, as you're going through this case, if I were the defendant, I would think, wow, that's a pretty big hammer to have hanging over your head if you were to lose. Of course, they, I'm sure, feel confident in their case, Madix and Sandoval, but still, you don't know. You never know, how a case is going to go or how the jury is going to rule. So, really interesting set of facts, a really interesting set of potential damages here, seeing, depending on how the case rolls out. So, there's also a motion that was filed to try and get this entire lawsuit tossed out. And I feel like we've talked quite a bit about this complaint and the claims and everything that are going on here. I'm wondering if maybe we save the motion for next Friday when we meet again and do our next Ask Two Lawyers, because it's a lot to go over.
Yeah, we've been going 42 minutes, and I think this is enough to digest for people for a week. And then next week, same time, same place, let's discuss further. But this is a very rich case, and it's a cutting-edge cause of action that you don't see every day. So it'll be interesting to see how the case develops. Yeah,
it really will be. So I guess that we'll make that our teaser. And so tune in next week where we will discuss the motion that Madix filed to try and get this entire lawsuit kicked out of court, and we'll tell you how the court ruled and what's going to happen based on that court ruling. So a lot of good stuff to go over still. So, all right, well, thank you for joining us for our really first episode of Ask Two Lawyers. Be sure to tune in next week to hear more about the Vanderpump revenge porn case, and also have your questions ready. Feel free to hit the comments, and if you have any questions, whether they're related to the case or just your general legal questions, we're here to answer those questions for you. We'll look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you, Stewart.
It's been fun.
All right. So we will see you all next Friday at 3 o'clock.